Fortunately, the Supreme Court struck it down. I would like to go back as president again and give the president the authority to lie down and veto. But that's not the issue. The issue is, were they transparent? And the bottom line was, when I was in the United States Senate, there was transparency, and Congressman Paul, who is one of the most prolific earmarkers in the Congress today, would tell you, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying that that's a fact, right, that he...
I think you got a little bit of a chance to say a word.
Mr. Speaker, you were referenced by the governor. You first, then Congressman Paul. Don't worry, we'll get to you, Congressman, I promise. Good.
Now, look, let me just say flatly, all of you need to think about this, because this is one of those easy demagogic fights that gets you in a lot of trouble. If you have Barack Obama as president, and you have a Republican House, you may want the House imposing certain things on the president. Now, when I was Speaker, for example, and we had a liberal Democrat in the White House, I actually want to reinforce what the governor said. I helped the Atlanta Olympics get the support they needed from the U.S. government to be successful. I thought it was totally appropriate to help the Atlanta Olympics, and I actually went to your former governor and sat down with the people originally planning the Winter Olympics and said, look, this is what we did. This is what you need to do. I think it was totally appropriate for you to ask for what you got. I just think it's kind of silly for you to then turn around and run an ad attacking somebody else for getting what you got and then claiming what you got wasn't what they got because what you got was right and what they got was wrong.
Congressman Paul, answer Senator Santorum, please, sir.
I followed that, and I
You know, there's reason for the confusion because because it's all Congress's fault. They're all messed up. They don't know what they're doing in Congress is the real reason. But this whole idea of earmarking is designating how the money is spent. What a lot of people don't understand is if the Congress doesn't say the way the money should be spent, it goes to the executive branch. And that's the bad part. If you were actually cutting, it would make a difference. But you don't want to give more power to the executive branch. Even if I'm president, I don't want more power over that funding. That should be with the people and with the Congress. But earmarking, the reason we get into trouble is the responsibility of Congress. Take your highway funds. We're supposed to pay a user fee. We pay our gasoline tax. We should get our fair share back. But what do? They take the highway funds and other these trust funds, and they spend this money overseas in these wars that we shouldn't be fighting. And then when the highways need building, then you have to go and fight the political system and know who to deal with and maneuver and try to get some of your money back. But if you say you're against the earmarking and fuss and fume over, the answer is vote against the bill. That is what I do. I argue for the case of the responsibility being on the Congress, but it's the responsibility of us who believe in fiscal conservatism to vote against the bill. We need to vote against the spending is what we need to do.
All right. Let's take another important economic question. This one comes to us from CNNPolitics.com, and you can see it in the audience up on the board here. Why was George W. Bush wrong in his efforts to save the auto industry, and why was Barack Obama wrong to continue the effort? Senator Santorum, I want to go to you first with this question. You, like your friends on the stage tonight, opposed the auto bailout. Michigan votes on Tuesday along with Arizona. We assume folks are watching there tonight. Address your answer to an auto worker who may believe strongly that he or she has that job tonight because of the bailout.
I would just say to them that I, in principle, opposed government coming in and bailing out a sector of the economy or an industry with government dollars and with government manipulation of that market, which is exactly what happened twice in 2008 and 2009. The first time it happened was the Wall Street bailout. On principle, I opposed the Wall Street bailout. Even though I understand reasonable people could disagree, I felt that having the government come in such a major way and have a huge influence over the direction of that industry, that would be damaging to what I believe is the best way to resolve these types of problems, which lets the market work. Constructive capitalism, as Governor Romney was talking about in his days of Bain Capital, and destructive capitalism. And that means pain. I understand that. But it also means limited government, allowing markets to work because we believe they're more efficient over time. I held the same consistent position when it came to the auto bailouts. I can say that with respect to Governor Romney, that was not the case. He supported the folks on Wall Street and bailed out Wall Street, was all for it. And then when it came to the auto workers and the folks in Detroit, he said no. That to me is not a consistent principled position. I had one. I believe in markets, not just when they're convenient for me.
Governor?
Nice try, but now let's look at the facts. All right, first of all, let's go back in the auto industry and go back to 2000, I think it was 2008. President Bush was still in office, and the three chief executive officers of the three major auto companies got in their private planes and flew to Washington and said, please write us a check. I think they wanted $50 billion. And I wrote an op-ed in the paper, and I said, absolutely not. Don't write a check for $50 billion. These companies need to go through a managed bankruptcy, just like airlines have, just like other industries have. Go through a managed bankruptcy. And if they go through that managed bankruptcy and shed the excessive cost that's been put on them by the UAW and by their own mismanagement, then if they need help coming out of bankruptcy, the government can provide guarantees and get them back on their feet. No way would we allow the auto industry in America to totally implode and disappear. That was my view. Go through bankruptcy. When that happens, then the market can help lift them out. With regards to TARP, it's very simple, or the Wall Street. Look, I don't want to save any Wall Street bank. I just don't want to make sure we lose all of our banks. And like President Bush at the time, I was concerned that if we didn't do something, there was a pretty high risk that not just Wall Street banks, but all banks would collapse. Yeah. And like many other people, many other economists, they were concerned that our entire currency system would go down. My view is this. We have to have industries that get in trouble go through bankruptcy. Now, Senator, you voted in favor of the bailout of the airline industry after 9/11. I think that was the right thing to do. It was an emergency. You also voted for the bailout of the steel industry. I don't think I agree with that one. But I do believe that the right course for the auto industry was to go through a managed bankruptcy process and then to get help getting out.
Governor, let me ask you, you mentioned President Bush's position on the Wall Street bailout. If you talk to people in the Bush administration at the time, they say they would have preferred the structured bankruptcy route that you talked about, but that there was no private capital available, that nobody would give the auto companies money, and that their choice, they say at the time, was to either give the government money or have them liquidate.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I wrote my piece and I said, look, these companies need to go through managed bankruptcy. And the head of the UAW said, we can't go through managed bankruptcy. The industry will disappear if that happens. And the politicians, Barack Obama's people, oh no, we can't go through managed bankruptcy. 6 months, they wrote, I think it was $17 billion in checks to the auto companies. Then they finally realized I was right. They finally put them through managed bankruptcy. That was the time they needed help to get out of managed bankruptcy. Those monies they put in beforehand that was wasted money. And number two, because they put that money in, the president gave the companies to the UAW. They were part of the reason the companies were in trouble. Giving these companies to the UAW was wrong.
Mr. Speaker, one second.
As Governor Romney Wells knows, that the American government shut down the airline industry after 9/11. And the government, by its action, stopped the airline industry from functioning. And yes, as a result of government action, which I thought it was appropriate for government since we shut down the industry after the events of 9/11.
I agree.
But government didn't shut down the banks. They didn't shut down the financial service industry. So when you compare those, it's not apples to apples, Mitt, and that's not a fair comparison.
Mr. Speaker, come in on the conversation. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. It's a major American industry at a time of trouble.
That's not a tough.
It's not tough, you say.
It's not tough. First of all, there was a huge amount of the American auto industry that was just fine. BMW in South Carolina was terrific. Mercedes in Alabama was doing just fine. Honda in Ohio was just fine. So the Toyota was just fine. What we have is a united auto workers and a management system that had grown very, I think, incapable of tough decisions because they were used to selling out to the United Auto Workers. And so they came in and said, oh, we can't change. And this president, on behalf of the United Auto Workers, said, you're exactly right. Now, the fact is Chrysler is now Fiat. So when we talk about saving the American auto industry, let's be clear what they were doing. I think that they would have been much better off to have gone through a managed bankruptcy. I agree with Governor Romney. I think it would have happened. I think what would have happened is the UAW would have lost all of their advantages. And the result was what you had, I thought, was an unprecedented violation of 200 years of bankruptcy law by Barack Obama to pay off the UAW at the expense of every bondholder.
So, Congressman Paul, as you join the conversation, there's criticism of President Obama here, but I also want you to address the state's current Republican governor. Rick Schneider, who supports Governor Romney, but that's irrelevant to this point. He says, quote, the bailout actually was something that really worked. Is that Republican governor wrong?
Well, you know that's interesting that when they argue that case. First, I don't like the idea that you have good bailouts and bad bailouts. If bailouts are bad, they're bad, and we shouldn't be doing it. But this argument about maybe one that works, you know, well, now that the bankruptcy or the bailing out of GM worked, I said that's sort of like if a criminal goes out and robs a bank and he's successful, therefore you endorse what he did because he's successful. But you have to rob people. You have to distort the law. The government is supposed to protect contracts. They're not supposed to regulate contracts, and they're not supposed to undermine contracts. And that's what we've been doing. In the housing bubble, we undermine contracts. And this is what we're doing here. So you want to respect the contracts. A lot of people will accuse me of advocating a free market, that there's no regulations. Actually, the regulations are tougher because you have to go through bankruptcy and you have to face up to this. And it isn't like General Motors would be destroyed. Newt made that point there, that there were good parts of General Motors, but politicians can't figure this out. Then they serve the special interest, and then you have labor fighting big business. I opt for the free market and the defense of liberty. That's what we need in this country.
All right. We're off to a good start, gentlemen. We're going to take our first break of the evening in a moment. Our Republican presidential debate here in Arizona continues. A lot more ground to cover, including two issues that are dominating the discussion here in Arizona in recent days: immigration and faith. Welcome back to the Mesa Arts Center in the Arizona Republican presidential debate. Let's get right back to questioning the four contenders for the Republican nomination. We take a question now from CNNPolitics.com. You can see it up on the screen here. Since birth control is the latest hot topic, which candidate believes in birth control, and if not, why? As you can see, it's a very popular question. It's a very popular question in the audience, as we can see. Look, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but it is. Please.
Can I just make a point?
Sure.
These guys are giving you some feedback here, John.
I see that.
I think they're making it very clear.
No, I think this. I'm going to make two quick points, John. The first is there is a legitimate question about the power of the government to impose on religion activities which any religion opposes. That's legitimate.
There is.
But I just want to point out, you did not once in the 2008 campaign, not once did anybody in the elite media ask why Barack Obama voted in favor of legalizing infanticide. Okay? So let's be clear here. If we're going to have a debate about who the extremist is on these issues, it is President Obama, who as a state senator voted to protect doctors who killed babies who survived the abortion. It is not the Republicans.
What's happened? John, what's happened, and you recall back in the debate that we had George Stephanopoulos talking all about birth control. We wondered why in the world, and contraception, and it's like, why is he going there? Well, we found out when Barack Obama continued his attack on religious conscience. I don't think we've seen in the history of this country the kind of attack on religious conscience, religious freedom, religious tolerance that we've seen under Barack Obama. Most recently, of course, most recently requiring the Catholic Church to provide for its employees and its various enterprises health care, insurance that would include birth control, sterilization, and the morning after pill. Unbelievable. And he tried to retreat from that, but he retreated in a way that was not appropriate because these insurance companies now have to provide these same things, and obviously the Catholic Church will end up paying for them. But don't forget the decision just before this, where he said the government, not a church, but the government should have the right to determine who a church's ministers are for the purposes of determining whether they're exempt from EEOC or from workforce laws or labor laws. He said the government should make that choice. That went all the way to the Supreme Court. There are a few liberals on the Supreme Court. They voted 9-0 against President Obama. His position...
So let's
his position on religious tolerance, on religious conscience,